stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Due to the increasing concern surrounding the coronavirus pandemic, this meeting will remain closed to the public. There are no scheduled public hearings, and there will be no public comment period. Live video and audio of the meeting will be aired on Comcast Local Channel 9. A recording of the meeting will also be posted on the West Bridgewater YouTube channel. Okay. First order of business is a proclamation recognizing Beverly Bates. As a community, we are fortunate to have many residents, town departments, and businesses who are kind, thoughtful, and giving. They selflessly donate their time, service, or donations to those in need and or for the greater good of the community. Jason Ross is here tonight to speak with us about Beverly Bates. Between 2018 and 2019, Beverly, at nearly 91 years old, sewed over $170 to donate to children in the hospital. Jason, please tell us more about Beverly.
Of course. So I've by it that, I'm an Eagle Scout, and our whole goal is to give back to the community. And I just read her thing, and it just said, it's just so incredible that Christmas time especially is a joyous time for all of us, but for others, it's a sad time. And regardless of people's situation, I could just imagine, kids being in the hospital at this time, it must be just so scary, especially young kids. And I just thought that what she was doing, could make someone's year. I thought that it was just so moving. I mean, I myself, when I was 13 at the time, I was in the hospital for a couple weeks, and I'll tell you, it was terrifying. It was during the summer, too, so that was a bummer. But, I was just really moved by her, and I saw the pictures of what she was making, and it was very sweet. And the fact that she's donating them all instead of selling them all, it really tells a lot about her character. And I wish she could be here on this Zoom call, but I'm sure she's watching on Channel 9 News right now.
Thank you.
So I reached out to the Selectmen, and thank you all for making this citation for her. I really appreciate it.
So we have a proclamation to read for Beverly. Proclamation of the Board of Selectmen, West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Whereas Beverly Bates decided, after celebrating her 90th birthday in July of 2018, that she wanted to start making blankets and toys for children in local hospitals, with a goal of $90, one for each year of her life. And whereas, despite her own health issues, Beverly Bates has continued to sew dolls for children in local hospitals, totaling over $150 donated. And whereas Beverly Bates has selflessly dedicated her time, talent, and resources to serving others for several years, and whereas Beverly's devotion to spreading happiness and helping others truly embodies the spirit of the town of West Bridgewater, and therefore be it resolved, we, the Board of Selectmen of the town of West Bridgewater, do hereby honor and commend Beverly Bates for her generous and compassionate nature. We extend to her our deepest appreciation for all of her charitable work and wish her well in all of her future endeavors. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the great seal of the town of West Bridgewater to be affixed this 5th day of August 2020. The Board of Selectmen, Denise Reyes, Anthony Kinahan, and Meredith Anderson. And I understand Beverly has been informed she'll be able to watch this on the local channel, and we will mail the proclamation to her as well. Thank you, Jason.
I really appreciate it. And I hope she likes it.
I'm sure she will. Very nice. Okay, at this point, we'll move on to approve the fiscal year, end of the year transfers.
Yes, so, at the end of every year, we always have a couple of transfers we have to do. Normally, we just have to do a snow and ice deficit, or we always have to do a snow and ice deficit. We didn't have that bad of a winter, so it was $81,000. The other three on there are for public works, which is $4,800, street lights, which is $15,000, and solid waste disposal, $16,000. For FY21, we increased the budget for street lights and solid waste disposal because we knew we were going to run short for those two. Snow and ice, we normally run short, and public work was pretty close. So really, it's just those four departments. It totals $116,800. As you know, I always budget additional monies in the benefits budget, specifically for health insurance. And as a result, if there's money left over, that's where we cover it. So under Mass General Law, a transfer of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee can just transfer the budget, so that way everything is then zeroed out. So I would ask you for your vote.
Motion to approve as presented.
Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. If we could just step back for a minute. I jumped right to business, but never gave you a chance to talk or acknowledge Beverly's proclamation, so I apologize. I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to say.
No, I wanted to thank Beverly for coming up with such a creative and such a kind gesture, and also to thank Jason for bringing this forward. I mean, that shows how forward-thinking he is, and we should also praise that as well. So thank you both.
I did read the article in the newspaper, and I think I saw it on Facebook too. And I was like, well, that's amazing. You know, the time she spends and her dedication.
Yeah, it was, and thank you, Jason, for bringing it to us, like Meredith said. And, thank you, Beverly, for everything.
So I apologize for jumping ahead there.
That's quite all right.
Okay. We have the vote for the transfers. Move forward to awarding I.W. Harding construction contract for Howard Street and Route 106 intersection.
So, as you know, we received just shy of $300,000, $287,000 exact, from the state of Massachusetts as part of a grant to do this intersection. We also received $300,000 at the town meeting this past June on the 29th. We went out to bid. It came out to be exactly $587,000 and a little bit of change. And so at this point, our options are, there was the lowest bid. They met all the criteria. So our options is one of two folders, that we award this bid now, or we hold off and we rebid it, but there's no guarantees, one, that we're going to get a lower price, and two, sooner or later, we run the risk of losing the money. So we basically did it as a base bid, which is to set up lights, widen everything out so we can have turn lanes. There's also going to be a sidewalk that goes directly from the center of lights all the way down to the Council on Aging. So that'll be a really nice add as well. We want to also extend some of the paving and milling in some of the areas, since it's going to be all open at that point. And unfortunately, as part of the bid, it was in excess of that, so we'll use our Chapter 90 funds because we'll be doing paving during that time period anyway. So with that said, we have a letter here from our construction engineer, Greenwood Peterson, GPI, acknowledging that $587,510.25 was the lowest bid, that they were the lowest responsible bid according to all of our procurement laws, with a recommendation that we award. If we award it this evening, they will start the process of mobilizing. Most of this work, including the sidewalks, should be done by the end of this year. And then in the spring is when you would see the lights go in, because it takes time to cure, and you can't put the lights in with the base going into the winter. So we'll drill everything in the spring. We'll drill everything in the fall, have everything prepared for that. And in the springtime, unless we have a mild winter, in the springtime, the lights will go in at that point. So I would ask you for a vote to award I.W. Harding Construction in the amount of $587,510.25.
So,
Yeah.
Am I allowed to, my husband is the assistant director of the DPW. Is there any conflict in participating in this vote? Based on that, I think just until we clear everything with the attorneys, I'd like to abstain.
So we spoke the other day, and we're going to get an ethics letter from town council. And so in the meantime, I do think just to protect yourself, it might be wise to do that.
I would like to.
Okay, so I'll second the motion. Any discussion?
All set.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, zoning boards of appeals, MGL 40B comprehensive permit application, Reservoir Apartments located at 477 West Center Street.
So the board, prior to when you were on the board, but back in February, there was a presentation to the Board of Selectmen from a 40B proposal. It is located next to Honeydew Donuts on Route 106. It is a proposal of 24 apartments, a handful of 1-bedrooms, a handful of 2-bedrooms, and 1 3-bedroom. The real issue with it is the fact that it only sits on 0.72 acres and is only going to have a little over 38 or 39 parking spots, plus handicap spots, plus 1 delivery spot for 24 apartments. Their parking ratio at that point is 1.4, which I think is wholly inadequate for a town that we know we do not have any public transportation infrastructure at that spot. And the fact that they're going to be adjacent to Route 24 is obviously going to be a big selling point for someone who commutes, but therefore you're going to need a car. The residents there on High Street, Church Street are obviously very concerned, and Front Street, and I don't blame them. However, the board then, based on the information we received from the developer, the board tasked me with writing a memo over to Mass Housing, which I did. We provided comments from the police chief, the fire chief, the Conservation Commission agent, the building inspector, and one of the residents that was there as well, all with the concerns of traffic, concerns about parking, concerns about emergency vehicles being able to fit in. And also our Conservation Commission agent has brought to light that it is immediately adjacent to a water-sensitive area or a high nitrogen level area, and there's been no testing of the water supply in that area. Mass DEP just does it based on GIS, which is close but not always entirely accurate. And so I believe we have notified the state, and with all that, the state still approved it. So we have in my report, because part of the 40B policy that the Board of Selectmen have approved is that I keep you up to date every step of the way. We received in the approval from the state, so you'll see it in my report. Once the approval comes in from the state, which is not to build, all it is saying that that place is eligible to be built on. It then has to go through the permitting process with the Zoning Board of Appeals. So at this point, this is a traditional site plan review that the board holds, which is we would provide any comments or concerns, positive or negative, to the Zoning Board of Appeals, so that way they can use as guidance as they go through that permitting process. So with your permission, what I would do is I would forward the concerns of the department heads that I spoke to earlier, and I would also include that I would think that the ZBA should take the additional step and require water testing in that area to make sure that there is no negative impact to our wells. In addition, a lot of times the board will add, because it's a residential area, even though it's right on 106, is to obviously mitigate for noise and dust pollution, all those things to protect the neighbors and the residents that are up there.
Do you have any comments, Anthony?
I don't know, we went through it a few months ago now. No one's really likes the project, but it is what it is.
Meredith?
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned about the water. Are there stormwater or other concerns there that would have to be addressed as well?
Yes, so the stormwater, all construction project, all large-scale commercial have to also put in a stormwater management plan. So they will have to get that approved through the Conservation Commission.
I don't know how they would do that on such a small spot.
Yeah, I mean, for example, building inspector makes a good point. What are you going to do with snow removal? You only have 38 spots plus the handicap and the drop-off. You have no place to store snow. You're literally going to have to pick it up and move it each and every single time that it snows.
They'll have to have a truck there.
They'll have to have a truck. But then that means that we're going to have probably a 6-wheeler or a 10-wheeler filled of snow entering onto Route 106 every single time. You know, that's
Yeah, were there concerns about the width of the streets around it?
There
I
are,
mean, they're very narrow streets right there.
there are. We included that letter into the state, and I'm sure the zoning board of appeals will have that conversation with them as well. We know this. This is what's going to happen. There's not going to be enough parking.
Right.
People are now going to park on the side streets, and then all of a sudden somebody has a fire, and the fire truck's not going to get around it.
Can
We
make
know
them-
that's going to happen.
Can we make them no parking in tow zones?
That's a good idea, to prevent it.
But that means it's existing. That means it's there. We do that once it's there. That means we didn't stop it.
Yeah, more like a last
Yeah, that's the
chance
last, yeah.
mitigation,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
You
and
know-
I'm saying it more so because, to your point, I'm concerned about the width of the street, and when it snows, or there's bad weather, and I'm also concerned that that's typically not a busy street. It's a very quiet side street. I mean, I know clearly there'll be a stop sign at the end, but should there be a blinking light there or something else to illuminate the fact that there's going to be more traffic on that street now?
So putting it like this is going to be really difficult because that'll require Mass DOT approval. They have jurisdiction within so far off the ramp, just from a safety concern. Let's revisit the idea of putting the tollway zone in no parking on that road. What we could do is that we could include in the letter to the ZBA that the Board of Selectmen intend to actually do that on that road. Meaning, we're giving the applicant a heads up.
Like,
Yep.
hey, you don't have enough parking, we know it.
Correct. So we're going to do that. The only thing I would caution the board on is this, is that if the developer develops it anyway, we're not penalizing the developer at that point, we're penalizing West Bridgewater residents at that point, who, no fault of their own, are going to rent there, and they're the ones that's going to be in this office all the time saying, I didn't do anything wrong. Me and my wife have 2 cars. Where are we supposed to park? You know, we do run that risk.
And I don't want to penalize West Bridgewater residents, but it's also buyer beware. You know, when you go to this building, you'll see there's not that many parking spaces, and if the signs are up informing them it's a tow-away zone, I mean, I am concerned, David, that people will be parking along that street, and it'll become very difficult to maneuver around there. And then you get snow, and what's going to happen if they live there? If there's not enough parking, they have no choice but to park on the street, and we have snow.
I
They're
agree.
going to run into that situation anyways.
No, it's a real legitimate concern. All I'm saying is if we do that, it'll be our residents that we will be ticketing. And it'll be those residents that will be here, probably talking to the parking clerk.
Oh, well, we could always take down the signs.
Again, I think what we can do is if we put in the letter informing the zoning board of appeals to inform the applicant that we're planning on doing that, that doesn't mean you're going to, but it means that you anticipate doing it, and then we can revisit it at that point, so at least it gives you some flexibility.
Or, at least at least limit the parking on the street to the daytime hours. I mean, we have to mitigate this somehow. I see it as a big problem.
I think showing the intention of not allowing people to park there would be a con for the builder. Like, that's going to be a mark against them, like, well, I don't know how we're going to deal with this when he's asked, right? Wouldn't it show our intention of not being in favor of the project?
How many residents do we have on Friend Street? Is there 1 or 2?
Yeah, I'm not even sure that there is one. Yeah, I think,
I know there's Blooms, and then behind Blooms, is there a house?
I've been there and I just don't recall.
There is, I think, but I don't think it's on Front Street.
Okay.
I don't think it's the drop.
So it'd be just Blooms,
Right.
the apartment building. Like I said, it's not a busy street, but if you need to get an emergency vehicle down there and people are parking on the street, it's not a good situation. And it's not our fault that there's only 1.4 spaces.
Correct.
If this is where they want it to go and the states approved it, then so be it. But I think we have every right to try to mitigate and make it as, as safe as possible.
Does the parking meet the requirement?
There is no 40B or requirement from Mass Housing
We
standpoint.
don't have a town on
We do, but that's why when they do a 40B, you're able to,
that. So what is our town?
usually two parking spots per bedroom. Per adult bedroom, I think is what, but there's a formula.
Okay.
So we're usually, our ratio would be 2. And when I was there, I was at the site visit with the lady from Mass Housing, there's no doubt that she understands the concern. But as she also said, they approve 40B projects all the time, say in Newton, where there's no parking whatsoever. So to them, 1.3 and 1.4 is actually pretty good.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still a problem. And when you look at urban areas, say in Newton, they usually have some type of infrastructure there for public transportation. We don't. And again, as I said earlier, this is purposely next to Route 24, which is going to attract commuters. That's something that the developer's counting on. It's a bad project. It's in a bad spot. It's in the wrong spot.
Isn't there also a concern about how tall the building will be?
So from a concern standpoint, our zoning right now only allows 40 feet. And they're going to be requesting a variance. In the history of the town, we've never provided a variance in any other project, residential or commercial, except for the high school. And the high school's exception was because we got an MSBA grant, 50% of the money, or $32 million. But 100% of the model schools that MSBA was approving, all of them had excess of 40 feet. So it was either you did no school, which you needed, you kissed away $30 million, which you're not going to do, but you had to do it. But that's the only exception. So the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to have to make a decision whether they provide the waiver. Now, if they provide the waiver, what that means is they'll allow them to build to that 47 feet. But the Zoning Board of Appeals has some latitude on that. And they could be able to argue, we're going to change the characteristics of the town because we've never approved this before. We're only going to allow 40 feet. We're not going to allow 47, so you'll have to change your design.
But like I said, I'd recommend parking restriction and/or tollway zone.
Great, I'll make a motion to pass along the comments from the department heads, the parking restriction intention, and the water testing. Is that the one?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I know you took a vote, but is it okay for me to classify the memo to the Zoning Board of Appeals that the Board of Selectmen are not in favor of the project?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do we need to vote on that, or? Okay.
I've captured the intention. Thank you.
Okay. Planning Board Site Plan Review, proposed retail and dentist office building located at 343 and 349 West Central Street.
So this one's much easier. So I think I placed a map. Did I include? Let's see, right here. So this is the buildings that you were thinking that it was.
Oh, okay.
So there's two buildings. On the left-hand side is an old dentist office, and the one on the right-hand side is a residential property. They are located on two legal lots, 343 and 349. The developer is going to demolish both buildings and then build one large building, about 6,500 square feet, on the entire parcel. It will include a dentist office, and it will include some type of a retail office on it as well. It will go through a site plan review with the planning board. This does not negate our bylaws, because it's not a 40B development. That means that they will have to have the correct parking, they will have to have the correct setbacks, they'll have to do all the things that our bylaws typically require. So this one here should just be a standard site plan review before the planning board.
I don't have any comments on this one.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
No, nothing, if there's no comments, the motion would be there's no comments to pass along to the planning board.
Okay.
Just also a quick question. You said retail was previously a dentist office. Are there any houses on either side?
Not on either side here, but there are in the back because Prospect Street backs up to it.
Okay.
So again, if you want to, for example, if you want to say concerned about noise or whatever, because
Lighting.
the planning board has that standard restrictions, but you're more than welcome to include those comments and we'll pass them along.
Yeah, I think we'd probably want to include concerns of lighting, noise. Presume they're going to have a fence in the back section. Retail, where they place the dumpster, those typical things.
Be courteous to the neighbors, yeah.
So if you want to just include that into a vote.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Do I have to repeat all that?
Motion to include what you just said.
Motion to include, you said to make sure we're courteous to the neighbors, they're timed with the dust, the lighting, the noise, and the dumpster.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Yeah, I need to take minutes before making a motion.
Ah,
Okay, sign the 2020 state primary warrant.
so this is your election warrant on September 1st. We will have a state primary. We have a contested race at the U.S. Senate level. We also have a state Senate race, a state rep race. This is all the primary. Basically, this is just a posting of the election that the Board of Selectmen sign. So you just take a vote just to say that you'll sign the 2020 state primary warrant.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion that will sign the 2020 warrant.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, vote on vacation carryover requests. We have Lorna Carroll, Rob Casper, Sue Kent, Peter Larson, and Jean Upton.
So Lorna's vacation request is for 4 days. Rob Casper, the Board of Health agent, is for 10 days per our bylaw. Sue Kent, Peter Larson, and Jean Upton are all for 5 days per their respective collective bargaining agreements. We don't normally have this many rollovers, but you've seen over the last couple of meetings we have, because under COVID-19, nobody was taking vacation time or going anywhere. So they're all entitled to it either through a bylaw or through their contract. I've already reviewed everything, signed off on it, and it just requires a vote of the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a motion?
I have a question. So some are allowed to carry over 10 days?
Yep, so Rob Casper is a department head by the bylaw is allowed to carry over 10, and the other ones that are respective to collective bargaining is maxed out at 5.
Oh, so each of those bottom three, with max was 5.
That is correct.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Appoint Board of Selectmen representative, and we have 3 committees. The Old Colony Planning Council, the ADA Coordinator, and the Brockton Area Transit Authority. David, could you just brief explanation of each?
Old Colony Planning Council is for our regional planning council. It's based out of Brockton. There's about 20 or 21 communities that are involved in it, and each town has a representative for it. The ADA coordinator is our local ADA commission or our local ADA board, that this person acts as the liaison. They can go to the meetings, report back to the selectmen. And the Brockton Area Transit Authority is the BAT bus that you will see up on Route 28, where their headquarters are in Brockton. Previous selectman Eldon Marrera has been the representative to all 3 for more than just a couple of years. And he has expressed an interest that he would like to remain on the Old Colony Planning Council and as the ADA coordinator. The ADA coordinator takes some time, but not a lot. The OCPC one is a considerable amount of time. They always meet once a month. They have subcommittees, and so that does require a considerable amount of investment of time. Both of them do not have to be a selectman. They just have to be a selectman's designee. So if you are inclined to vote for Eldon, you can. If not, you can certainly appoint yourself as someone else. Mr. Marrera does not have any interest in continuing on the Brockton Area Transit Authority. I believe he went to some of the meetings, but I will say that's probably the one that he didn't go to every single meeting. It doesn't really impact the town of West Bridgewater a lot. So if you don't want to appoint someone to that, then we can always try to get somebody in the future. You can appoint yourself. but that's a choice that you get to make.
All right. I'm fine with Eldon remaining on those.
I am as well.
process.
Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't sure he was going to be interested. I was looking into the Old Colony Planning Council. But if Eldon is willing to take it on, I would much rather let him continue.
All right,
I'll
so
make a
this-
motion. Sorry.
I was going to ask for a vote, but
I'll make a
You're-
motion to appoint Eldon to the Old Colony Planning Council and the ADA Coordinator.
Is there a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, what about the Brockton Area Transit Authority?
I didn't look that one up. I'm sorry. I wasn't initially interested in that one.
Do you want to,
I'm fine doing it if we want it to be one of us.
okay.
Do we have to have a representative?
So you don't have to, no. Again, there's not a lot of impact to the town of West Bridgewater because we don't do a lot with that. And I know Eldon was pretty religious at going to his meetings.
Okay.
And that was one of the meetings he didn't always go to. Because the one thing I will let you know, Selectman Kinnahan, is it's not always at night. That was one of his frustrations, is half the time they met during the day. And so I can't guarantee that's always going to be the way it is, but I do know that that was one of his frustrations. So, but again, if you ought to be appointed and you're able to make it to some of the meetings, then great. If we don't have anyone go, then we would just see as to, and truthfully, I've been here for 7 years and never once did Eldon come back and like make a report from Brockton area saying that there was something really going on, right? So I don't think that there's a major impact to the town. But obviously, I'm sure if they were here, they would love to have somebody representing the town of West Bridgewater. And so
Right.
Anthony's willing.
So for the sake of clarity, why don't we just take a vote on the first motion, then we'll circle back. So if we could have a vote on your first motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So if you'd let Eldon know that
Yep, will
he's
do.
been appointed, and we greatly appreciate him contributing his time.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so now we need to vote for the Brockton Area Transit Authority. Any ideas as to what you think we should do there?
Maybe wait and see if, chances are I won't be able to go to a lot of the meetings if they are during the day. So maybe see if we can get someone to volunteer that can go to most of the meetings at least.
Mary?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd like a chance to at least research it before saying I am or am not interested.
Okay.
I honestly didn't look at that one.
So,
Hold off.
want to table that? Want to take a vote to
About to
table
make a
that?
motion to table.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll table that one, David. See if
Absolutely.
maybe someone might be interested in volunteering for it.
I will.
Okay. Right, update on the Southeastern Regional Capital Asset Plan Assessment.
So Southeastern Regional every single year comes in and they provide what their minimum assessment is for the town to fund. And as part of that budget, there are multiple quote-unquote buckets as a part of it. There are operational expense, transportation costs, and capital improvement costs. They restructured their debt, so their debt load is actually going to now be a little bit different and a little bit lower than what it was before. So the memo in here states that in FY22, you'll see the top line, there you go, FY22, that the town of West Bridgewater's annual capital assessment will actually be reduced between $2,083 up to $6,738. Now that doesn't mean their overall budget's going to go down. It just means that portion of the budget is going to be reduced. So we have an option. Within 30 days of their vote, which happened on July 14th, is that we could call a town meeting, and in the town meeting, we could have the town vote their appropriation of their debt at $8.2 million. There's no legal requirement we have to do it. You would only do it if you actually didn't want to accept the new capital reduction assessment. But where it goes down, and you're going to be assessed it anyway, it's really a waste of time to go to a town meeting. So I had a conversation with the school, made sure I fully understood it, we reviewed it, and I had a conversation with the chair, because under our form of government, it would take 48 hours to call a selectman meeting, then it would take 14 days to call a special town meeting. We didn't receive this until July 17th, and we had to have it done by August 14th. So we made a decision because it didn't make sense to have a town meeting, but I thought it was wise to bring it up to the full board so you were all aware.
I didn't see any sense in calling a town meeting to have the residents vote to not pay as much. It seemed pretty simplistic.
Does it reduce the overall budget, or does it reduce just this line item?
Just this line item.
So they could increase the budget somewhere else
Correct.
as part of a bottom line. So it's not actually technically saving us anything.
Well, we don't know. We've always been at foundation budget with them, which is the bare minimum that the state allows them to charge us. So you are right. There's no doubt that they could play a shell game with the numbers. Truthfully, because they've always been at minimum, it seems like they're kind of locked in. But at the end of the day, the budget is the budget. We pay the minimum assessment. Part of that assessment is this formula, and it didn't make any sense to call a special town meeting to go through that process, knowing, in theory, we're supposed to save a couple of $1,000 a year.
I think over at least my time on Finance Committee and my time here, we've all challenged the budget for Southeastern Regional and asked for the math that goes into calculating it and the town's portion of it, our assessment. I've never been able to figure it out. I don't know if anyone else has been able to figure it out. It's challenging, but they do a really good job of putting it together and making the presentation. They were always willing to answer questions when they make the presentation. And in this case, they came to us and told us, okay, it's going to cost less in this area. You're absolutely right. They could use the money somewhere else. But that happens with every budget we vote on. They're all bottom line budgets, regardless of what department you look at. So, except this is capital, I believe. This is the capital assessment portion of it. So I don't know if it would be so easy for them to move those numbers around without our vote. But it is what it is. That's about all I have to say on that. I don't know if we need a vote.
You don't need a vote.
It's a
It
done
was just
deal.
an FYI to the entire board.
Yeah. I hope you agree with the logic that went into it. We were under a time constraint. And we didn't expect our next meeting to be until the 19th, so. Any discussion on it? Any concerns? No. Okay. All right. Approve meeting minutes of June 17th and June 29th.
So moved.
Is there a
I
second?
want to abstain from the first one because I was not present or part of the meetings.
Okay.
But I was for June 29th.
That's
Okay.
good. So what I would do is just make it as a two motions.
Okay. So,
Please.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 17th.
second? All those in favor?
Aye. Motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 29th.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Accept the meeting minutes of July 8th, 2020 for review. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, communications and reports from boards, commissions, and town officials. Do any of the boards or commissions have anything to report? No? Nothing going on there, okay. Correspondence from the public to determine a course of action. Do we have any correspondence we wish to discuss? Public comment period. There is no public here, so I guess there'll be no public comment period. Is there anything either you or Mary have about going on around town? No, okay. Town administrators report.
So thank you. So first, COVID-19 update. It's a little old. I know we're all tired of talking about it, but just a couple of. I want to make sure that we bring you up to speed. For almost 6 weeks, we had no cases in the town of West Bridgewater. Over the weekend, we received 4. So we have 4 new cases. Unfortunately, it's also trending upward in the state for cases. And the state of Massachusetts last week, starting on August 1st, create a 14-day quarantine policy that if you travel outside of the New England region, New York, New Jersey, and surprisingly Hawaii, that you must quarantine for 14 days upon return, or you get a test sent within 72 hours before returning to the state. As of today, Rhode Island now has been removed from that list, and that has now been restricted as well, because apparently Rhode Island, their case numbers are increasing. The governor had a press conference yesterday and today, and he is forewarning that if our case numbers do not start trending in a different direction, that they may have to look at reverting back to phase 2. So we'll see how that plays out. In reference to the town of West Bridgewater, the town hall opened back on July 8th for all employees, and on July 13th it opened to the public. The library is still only doing curbside. However, I have had discussions with the library director, and we're trying to put in some protocols so that way we could start to reopen it. And the Council on Aging at this point has remained closed.
The 4 cases in West Bridgewater, are they I don't know if you can tell us this or if you even know, but are they at Life Care or are they residents?
I do not know. I did not ask the question. The next on the list is just 40B eligibility approval. Again, we discussed the 40B project earlier. I'm just informing the board that the state did approve the site, so that way the applicant could go forward through the permitting process. We discussed it earlier. S2800, under my report under C, it stands for Senate Bill 2800. This here is in reference to police reform. This bill has taken on more than just police reform. It is now there are parts to it that requiring police officers to be certified or decertified by a civilian board. It is talking about reducing or eliminating qualified immunity for police officers and other municipal officials. It is trying to change a whole host of what we would do and what we've been used to with training, and require racial insensitivity training for all police officers as well. In addition to that, there are other elements of the bill that would discuss new aspects of collective bargaining and civil service reform. Truthfully, from my position, collective bargaining changes in civil service reform would be extremely welcome. As everyone knows, it is very difficult to be able to terminate a police officer, and for the people who are pushing this bill, they see that as an issue where if you have a police officer that you know is a bad officer, it is difficult to be able to terminate. A handful of years ago, we did terminate a police officer in the early part of 2014. It cost us 6 figures to defend and about 4 years of litigation. We prevailed at every level, but it was costly, it was expensive, and you never knew, because there is sometimes every once in a while that an arbitrator says at that point, you know what, maybe just suspend them for 3 months and bring them back. If that's 3 years later, you're on the hook for 2.5 years worth of back pay. So some of those provisions have to be addressed and discussed. The House bill when it went to the House had a lot of changes to it. They were looking not to include as strong parts about reducing qualified immunity, and they were also looking to make some changes, but that did not line up with the Senate bill. As a result of that, it is in conference committee right now. And whether or not a bill comes out as a result of it, we don't know. From what I am told from the legislative aide that has briefed us on this, I sit on a statewide committee that involves police chiefs and managers, my counterparts, and we receive legislative updates, is that there are substantial differences between the two bills. And one of the police chiefs that is on there talked about that part of the Senate bill that is not in the House bill is the fact that police officers would not be able to actually put hands on except for during an arrestable offense. And what that does is that just goes too far. And the example that this police chief used is that if there is somebody standing on top of a building ready to throw themselves off and commit suicide, because that is not an arrestable offense, the police officer can no longer grab that person and save their lives. Obviously, we want the police officer to save that person. It's just too far. So with that said, we'll see as to what an ultimate bill prevails, if it prevails. In the meantime, I've also included a letter here from the town of Rutland, because MMA took a very strong position in support of S2800. And they didn't consult many people at our level. They just they wrote the letter and stated that they were in support. And the town of Rutland took umbrage at it because many times the MMA consults with and or really represents the administrative aspect of towns. But think about this. This is a pretty anti-police bill. So at least in the town of Rutland, the police department went to their Board of Selectmen thinking that the Board of Selectmen must have supported this, and they never did. But if you read the MMA letter, you would think that the MMA must have received or solicited support from chief executive officers in the towns, which they clearly didn't. So the town of Rutland sent a letter to MMA saying that they were pretty displeased that MMA took it upon themselves to send that memo. So I don't know how this is going to play out. Our police chief has been actively involved in it. I've had many conversations with him as well about it. He has gone to multiple chiefs meetings. There have been chiefs rallies in reference to this. Fire now, there is now some action from the fire departments. And the reason being is because fire now recognizes that when it comes to qualified immunity and civil service reforms and weakening of collective bargaining reforms, that it doesn't just affect the police department, it affects the fire departments. So, although as managers, I would like to see collective bargaining reform because I think it's badly needed, the qualified immunity is a real problem because that's going to force one of our guys, our police officer is in the dark. They're not sure if somebody is armed. They may think twice before they actually take action. Or maybe they decide not to enter that quote-unquote place because they don't want to put themselves at risk. Firefighters who are now EMS people, are they going to lose some of their qualified immunity because they think that they're doing the right thing, trying to save somebody's life in a medical condition, and if they do the wrong thing, are they now going to actually face potential individual pushback? So we understand why the Senate was taking the action that it did. Many people feel that it probably went a little bit too strong without vetting it long enough in advance. So we'll see how it comes out. If you are wondering, our local senator did vote in favor of it.
Have any other boards in other towns sent letters in favor or not in favor? Is that appropriate, inappropriate, common?
So I am not aware of any other board that has sent comments. I am aware of a handful of mayors who did. Again, they can individually act on their own, so it's easier and quicker. All of this took place in a couple of weeks. You didn't even have a meeting during the time. And most other boards didn't either, because it was during the summer. So many mayors did. The mayors are, for the most part, obviously from Boston-centric cities. And they, for the most part, were not only just in support of S2800, some of them didn't think it went far enough. As you know, there are some movements that defund police. There is movement in some cities to have a minimal police force and for some interactions to have civilian interaction. The truth of the matter is, without making this into a political statement, the reason police came about a couple of 100 years ago and started in Europe was because civilian interaction didn't work. And we know of humans that lived for millions of years without police, and without police, some people took advantage of other people. So you need a police force. We have to make sure that they're properly trained. And that's why at our last meeting, I give our police department so much credit, because for 2 years prior to this, they made sure that they got themselves accredited and certified through the state of Massachusetts with all the latest protocols and policies. And we can never guarantee the future, but we have not seen these actions in the town of West Bridgewater. And I think it's true to great leadership in that department, and also recognizing years ago that we had to have really good policies and practices. Again, we all know it was not a good thing what happened in Minneapolis. We all know that. That's easy to admit. We have not seen that happen in Massachusetts, because one of the things that's great about Massachusetts is many years ago, we started to incentivize police officers to get bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. And when you get really well-educated police officers and they get really good training, then hopefully some of these incidences do not play out. So With that said, to answer your question, I'm not aware of other boards. I am aware of mayors who have signed some letters.
Okay, so, I mean, would it be
I'd
something
be
you'd be
fair.
interested in doing? Would you be interested?
Yeah, I sent Senator Timilty an email a couple days before the vote. Unfortunately, I didn't receive a response before he had taken the vote, but I'd absolutely be in favor of sending a letter from the board to, well, now we'd send it to our rep and senator, but also the committee. What committee did you say it was in?
It's a conference committee, so I'm not sure who's on it, but we can certainly find out.
Yeah.
Meredith? Do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think education is key, and I love how smart and educated our state and especially our own police officers are. So I definitely agree with you, David, that education has made a huge difference in our area with the police force. And I would be in support of the letter as well.
Yeah, I think that there are some, in my opinion, there's some valid points in this bill, but it was rushed through to get something done, and I don't think the people who live the job, like the chief and other chiefs in other towns and cities, were given adequate notice and opportunities to contribute. Definitely put the fact that sure, education is a key component, but put something together with the people who have the most experience as to what they live day to day and work together with them to put together something that's meaningful for everyone rather than to punish everyone for a few. So yeah, if we could put together a letter, is there a motion?
So I just want to make sure I know what I'm capturing.
Okay.
The Rutland letter actually didn't really necessarily focus on necessarily being against the S-2800, although it was. Its more criticism was of the MMA for sending correspondence without consulting with local leaders first. So if this is just a conference committee, my guess is we're not addressing that issue. We're going to address potentially the following issues.
Yeah, the MMA issue, I don't really care that much about it. I'm more concerned with the actual legislation.
Okay, so with that said, I assume that we would be in favor that we want collective bargaining in civil service reform. As managers, you would want that. It gives us more flexibility and freedoms. In reference to police reform, our real objection is not only the language itself, it's the fact that there really wasn't a lot of input from the people it affects the most, which is police. And the second, and again, do you want me to also send a letter to Mr. Timilty and Mr. Dubois stating that do you want to say that you're disappointed that they voted for the bills? They didn't consult with me. They didn't consult with you. I can tell you that Senator Timilty did consult with our police chief, but that was on the police chief's call. And I was going to make a phone call to him as well, but when I heard about the conversation, there was no sense in doing that. I had already lost an earlier battle with him on a different bill.
Would it be helpful for you to get together with the chief and draft a letter? Because I think, I'm in the opinion, I'm supporting our police department, and I'm supporting the chief. He's in that job for a reason. He knows what he's doing, and he does a phenomenal job. He's a great leader, and he, every opportunity to improve the department, he is there for it. So I don't know if I necessarily want to try to put into my own words what he's thinking. So maybe he could help draft a letter and
We'll read it and sign it all
Right.
the time. And if the three of us disagree on it, then we have to bring it to the next meeting. But
Right.
Assuming all of us agree with what's written, then we'll sign it and send it.
because I can't say I 100% understand each point of it.
Sure.
And there may be parts even in the collective bargaining agreement or in the immunity issue, there might be small pieces he's okay with, and others he's not. So if we could focus on the real issues he has with it, I think I'd feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Support the chief. Let's get his point across.
So it's not something we need to vote on, right? Okay.
Reimbursement from Plymouth County CARES Act. This is federal funds that went to Plymouth County that allows us for COVID-related, specific COVID-related expenses to be reimbursed for. Through June 30th, we had just shy of $178,000 worth of expense that we've been reimbursed. For example, the plexiglass. And there's about $1.2 million that have been allocated to the town of West Bridgewater. The school is going to have a considerable amount of money going forward. And just to let you know, when it comes to the schools, we will be responsible for our local school, but also the proportion of our children at Southeast Regional as well. So if Southeast Regional spends, in theory, $1 million, and 18% of their children are West Bridgewater students, then our West Bridgewater residents, then 18% of that 1 million would be part of this money as well. They have to funnel it through us.
So that's a different calculation than our share of the tuition for Southeastern.
This is right. This has nothing to do with the tuition.
This will be less.
Right, because
This
we
will be-
pay more than the number of students
Right.
that go.
Yeah, but so this will be. So I'm just informing that right now it looks like, hey, we have about $1 million, but the school's going to spend a lot of money because they've got to have a lot of expense, you know, and then the same thing that we have. Not just our local school, we have Southeast Regional, we have other expenses. We're going to try to get the library up and running. We eventually have to do something with the Council on Aging. There'll be additional expenses coming. We have put in for more additional Chromebooks, for example, because unfortunately, based on the rhetoric that I'm hearing, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up reverting back to phase 1 or phase 2 and municipal buildings have to close again. I want to make sure that everybody has the resources. So we're going through that phase. My point is, well, I'll probably end up spending close to that $1 million. I don't think we're going to leave a lot of money on the table.
Now, is the school seeking reimbursement separately, or is that done through this one?
It's done through us.
So I know I read something about $265 per student was going to be reimbursed.
Yeah, it's that is politics 101. It is such a shell game. It's quite frankly, it's frustrating. So what the Baker administration did was that they had said that they were going to allocate $225 per student. So at that point, I was pretty excited. I met with the school superintendent in New England, Mark Boswell. We figured it out. It was going to be $323,000. So we're thinking it's $323,000 plus whatever can be reimbursed. Until they sent the memo and they said, "Oh, it's coming from this money." And we said, "Well, it's the same money then."
Right, so what was the point?
And not right. And not to mention, the money has to be spent for COVID-related expenses. So you would still have to justify, in that case, $323,000 in order for it to get reimbursed. So at this point, we're not following the formula. Because it doesn't matter if it's $225, $150, $875, it doesn't matter. If they have a legitimate COVID-related expense and we have the money, I have told the superintendent to put in for it and we'll reimburse it.
Is there anything we can do with these funds to directly help the residents? Masks, sanitizer. I mean, that's an added expense for the residents. They're not going out and buying bulk masks and hand sanitizer. I know it's not, over the one at a time, not a lot of money. But, if you have a senior living on a fixed income and they have to go out and buy a box of masks and use one, throw it away, households that are, lower income, is there any way we can help with these funds to get it directly to the residents in some sort of aid? So
right now, everybody's required to wear a mask, for example, when they come into the town hall. If they come to the town hall and they say, "I don't have a mask," we will provide them one. Obviously, we're not going to take it back. They get to keep it. So under that scenario, the answer is if somebody comes to the town hall and they don't have one, we're going to provide them. We're going to pay for it. We can get reimbursed. In fact, the masks that we have been reimbursed through this process. Can we just send out a memo and say, "Come in here and get hand sanitizer and masks"? The answer is no. That wouldn't be a municipal expense at that point. So, but again, somebody goes into, eventually the library opens and they want to walk in, we're going to have hand sanitizer available. At the elections, we had hand sanitizer available. We paid for that through this. So people were able to do what they had to do with their hands. And we had masks available at that point as well. include also gloves. We paid for it through this. So in an indirect way, if I don't want or I can't pay for a mask and I come into the town hall, I'll get one, and through these funds, they would be able to secure a mask. Do I envision 8,000 people lining up that way? No. And can I just, again, send out a memo and say, well, buy everybody a mask? The answer would be no.
Well, I was thinking a box, but for a couple boxes. Okay, so it has to be a municipal improvement of some sort. It can't be direct aid in some form.
I would say it's part of our municipal operations. If we were able to prove in years past that we provided masks as a matter of normal service to everybody, then I don't even know, but maybe we could stretch that. But that's not something we normally do.
Okay, what about internet services? We are expecting a second round of this in the spring, in the fall. Can any of these funds be used to? No, it's back to.
If you're going to pay them anyway, you can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we have used the funds to make sure that our infrastructure is at the next level for internet and access with hardware and software, but we can't do it for a resident. So next on is early voting. This was the conversation I had with Senator Timilty. The Senate and the House did pass early voting for 1 week, August 22nd to August 28th. That means people are going to be able to come in and actually cast a ballot in person before the election of September 1st. Historically, which is only one other election, we had early voting in the mail room across from the town clerk's office. But obviously due to COVID-related, we can't have 18, 20, 25 people in the building at that point. And we can't social distance that many people. We can't have stand in line. That room is also used as for other parts of our municipal government. So we couldn't have for them voting and other people going in and keeping people socially distant. The room's just too small. So the Council on Aging, as we discussed, is closed. It's a large building. So we've moved everything over to there. That is, the town clerk is making sure that gets communicated out. And again, we'll use whatever we had to incur for expenses, we will get reimbursed through the CARES Act that we just discussed.
Okay, so another question back to the CARES Act. Can we use any of the CARES Act money to subsidize the Meals on Wheels program?
How is that a COVID-related expense? I mean,
I'm just...
now, we have used some of it for the schools when they were doing their lunch program.
Okay.
Because, that was legitimate. We had closed, and those people needed access to the food, and so we were able to supply it through that.
Okay,
But
so
Meals on Wheels is only to seniors who had already qualified for the program, really chiefly due to economic reasons.
okay.
We haven't expanded that, and the only way to expand it would be through the Meals on Wheels program criteria.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be using it as COVID.
Okay, but more of the seniors probably aren't going out now because of COVID, and they're high risk.
I will say this.
Maybe something Maryland could look into,
Sure.
or I know I'm grasping at straws.
I've been working with some of the women in town who are working together to make sure that the food is being distributed, and I know that there are representatives regarding the Meals on Wheels, the school lunch program, the farm box veggie to the families, and the food pantry, that they're all working together to make sure the food is not being wasted and being sent out to everyone possible. And I know that they've had a positive response, and they've been able, from the emails that I've received, been able to service everyone that's looking for it. They haven't heard of a situation in town where someone came forward with a need and they weren't able to supply it. I know there's assistance going on through the library. They have, I know there's something going on with the gift cards and groceries. There's a lot of different smaller programs going on around town right now.
But to your point, I think what I can do is I can have a conversation with Maryland, and if there is a senior that would qualify for Meals on Wheels that has now suffered economic hardship as it related to COVID-19, then maybe we can do it through that. When
I'm
COVID
just,
starts.
there's $1.2 million out there, and while it's likely to all get spent. If there's, any seniors and any family in town for that matter, not just seniors, if there's anyone out there that's been directly impacted by COVID-19 and there's some way, some small way we can assist them. Because there's a group of people that are missed almost. They're not collecting unemployment because they didn't work. So they're not entitled to that economic benefit. They don't work, so they're not, they may not be getting any benefit out of this other than, stay home, isolate because they're high risk, and that's it. And that may put them at a financial disadvantage because maybe if they were out, they might be babysitting for their daughter or granddaughter and getting a few extra dollars that way to make ends meet. Well, they can't do that now because they're high risk. So there are a group of people that are left out and maybe are incurring some financial disadvantages because of this. So I'm just looking at any possible way of getting some help to them.
Yep, I don't disagree. I just want to make sure that we have a responsibility to deliver municipal services, and that all of our departments that need the resources have it, because I would hate to be at this point where Maryland says, yep, we can do it, and I spend a couple of $1,000s a month, and 10 months later that's $20,000, and the fire chief comes to me and says, I just ran out of protective gear, and all that $1.2 million is gone, and now I get turned to the taxpayer for the money.
When's the date on this? Does this have a date by which all funds have to be utilized?
So the conversation right now is December 31st, but the expectation is it'll be June 30th of next year.
Okay, but I'm sure each department's putting together, they must have a forecast, so I hope they wouldn't come at some point and say, gee, I just ran out of masks when this is available to us now.
No, but for example, the fire department has already purchased a whole bunch of protective clothing, but as they use it, they'll have to be reimbursed. They'll have to replenish.
Okay.
So they use it, they replenish in November. They use it, they replenish in January. They use it, they replenish in March. And then I say to him in April, no more money. And he says, really? You bought this when my firefighters are out there dealing with it? I think we just have to be sensitive to that. That's all.
We'll only take $500,000 probably.
Next is that as part of the climate of police reform on a coronavirus budget bill at the last minute, June 19th, was incorporated as a new state holiday. There seems to be some confusion as to exactly what that will mean. The law states that it will be celebrated on a Sunday with a proclamation from the governor. It's been certainly reported that it will be a full-fledged state holiday, like you could think of any other state holiday. That will have impacts on us. All of our union agreements all recognize all state holidays. So therefore, this would be an additional holiday with police and fire because it's a 24/7 service. They would be, they have to be backfilled and paid for. Between police and fire, we've already done the amortization. It would cost us about $20,000. In reference to administrative costs, for example, the town hall would just be closed. It doesn't cost you any more money, but obviously one lost day of productivity. Just an FYI to the board, so you're aware. I will tell you that HRD, which is the Human Resources Department for the state of Massachusetts, is looking at this because they have to make a decision as to whether or not this holiday will be included for all state employees as well. So we're going to take that cue from that, is what I'm really thinking. But because it's not till next June, I wouldn't be surprised if HRD doesn't actually get to it till April or May. Good news, at least in the short term, is that our local aid for FY21, the state has still not approved a budget. They have approved, remember when we did a 1/12 budget? They've approved a 1/12 budget through October, and you weren't on the board at that point. But what that meant is that we looked at last year's budget, and we said, okay, if your budget was $12 million, we're going to approve $1 million per month. So the state has done that through October. When they're actually going to approve a budget, we're still not sure. But in theory, they'll do it sometime in the November timeframe. In the meantime, they have sent a commitment letter from House leadership, Senate leadership, and the governor saying that our local aid, which is our Chapter 70 funds for education, in our local aid that comes directly to the town will be level funded at FY20 levels. Now, what we did was during the budgeting process is that I took up my FY21 projections at that point and reduced them by 10%, assuming about a 10% cut in aid, because that's what we were being told. Excuse me. If they honor an FY20 level commitment, we will actually be in pretty good shape, because FY20 is going to be slightly higher than what we budgeted for. So we'll be in really good shape at that point. One thing I would caution is this is just a letter. There is no vote. It has not passed anything. And in years past, chiefly under the Patrick administration, is that whenever there was needed cuts during the year, they would call them 9C cuts, and what they would do is that they would cut that aid to municipalities. When we receive our local aid, it is not given in one tranche, say in July up front. It is given to us either monthly or quarterly, depending on how they release it. So in the month of November, the governor has the individual unilateral decision at that point to say, we're running a deficit, we've closed again, we've reverted back to phase 2. As a result, I made this commitment, but we can't afford it, and they can make a reduction at that point. So although this is good news, we can't bank on it yet, because there is still no budget passed and no vote, just a letter of commitment. But it's good news.
And you said the money could trickle out monthly versus a quarterly?
Right now, it
monthly?
either trickles out monthly or quarterly, depending on how they release it. The main goal that I was saying was that it does not we do not receive it in a large bucket up front.
Right.
Because once you have it, it's hard for them to take it back. So that's why I just caution everybody that although right now this is good news, anywhere during the year they could say, stop, sorry, we're not paying you this month. There's nothing we can do. I mean,
Right.
it's state aid. So we'll see. And unfortunately, at least during the Deval Patrick administration, there was precedent for multiple years that did occur. Last is that I think most people would agree, although I know not everybody, but most people would agree that Route 106 is a pretty overly taxed road. In many areas, it's only single lane in either direction. The second part is that where Crescent Street and Lincoln Street currently are, is that they do not line up. And I come to work every single morning, and whenever somebody attempts to come out Crescent Street, I'm amazed as to how many people still attempt to take a left onto Route 106 there, and they wait forever. And then there's accidents because, quite frankly, they become impatient, and they start to die. So with that said, I met with a engineering firm over the past couple of weeks, and we have applied for a Mass Works grant that would allow us to be able to line up Lincoln Street and Crescent Street, so that way we could have a four-way intersection with a set of lights, and then we would have double lanes in up to Route 24, and we would have double lanes under their proposal right now to West Street. I would like it to go all the way to Market Basket, but it's going to depend on funds. So we're putting in 2 requests. This one here, the estimated cost is at about $3 million. There would be much more going to Market Basket. It's only about another 3,200 to 3,500 feet. However, we run into conservation land areas, and we run into takings at that point, which adds a lot of time and a lot of money. So the state is looking for shovel-ready projects that have a new commercial infrastructure as part of this plan during their award policy. So I have been in contact with a developer who is looking to develop this parcel down here on the left-hand side of Lincoln Street. It is 74 acres. We're still in preliminary discussions as to where that will be and what that will finally entail. But in order to do that, it is going to require a zoning change. So I'll be coming back before the board on September 2nd after the planning board meets. They are actually discussing it tonight, and then they'll meet again with the report and with the developer at your September 2nd meeting. So that way they can discuss with you as to what they're looking to develop it there. Bottom line is if that developer develops that property and it is not residential, it would be commercial, industrial, and retail, is that would give us a legitimate large increase in our tax base. He would then retain rights to current Lincoln Street, and then we would retain rights to the new Lincoln Street as part of this project. So we submitted that to MassWorks. The engineering firm is willing to do the application at no cost to the town up front. This is all they do. They're experts at it. They do it throughout the entire state. And the nice thing about a MassWorks grant is that it is awarded in the last week of October, which highly coincidentally lines up with the election. But they will make their award at the end of October. Depending on certain aspects, if we get the rezoning, it strengthens our case because now we have a development that would be going in there. They feel strongly that we would be able to qualify for it. And under a MassWorks grant, if they issue the money immediately, we can go out to bid, and within 12 to 18 months, we could have this entire intersection all approved and done. And again, it wouldn't cost us any money. The only cost at this point is the fact that we do have to survey it, which costs us would be around $25,000. And if we can get this intersection, if we can get the developer and if the board is in favor of the development and town meeting is in favor of the development and the rezoning of it, I feel like we could probably go to the developer at that point and attempt to negotiate that as part of it. If we can't, then we get $3 million and we'll have to come up with some money for the surveying, but I'm hoping we can make that as part of the negotiations. So it was just an FYI to the board that we've submitted an application because we're hoping to be able to do this. We are hoping to be able to double lane Route 106. We are hoping to be able to free up traffic on Lincoln Street and on Crescent Street, being able to take left and right hand turns, hopefully broaden the tax base, and we'll have the developer here before you in about a month at your next meeting, so you'll be able to see the full development and be able to answer any questions that you have. At that point, we will need to call a special town meeting if you are in favor of going forward with it, and at that point, we would call a special town meeting with the purpose to try to rezone that area.
When would we potentially be going to a special town meeting?
So I would want to do it at the end of September, and the reason being is because if it gets rezoned, then I'm hoping that I can use that as negotiations with the developer to pay for the survey work, get the survey work done immediately, then add an addendum to the application, because that application is going to be discussed and approved at the end of October. So we have to give the engineer some time to survey it, and then get the addendum to the application, and then lobby to get the award. So from a timing standpoint, we'd be talking mid to late September.
And when it goes to special town meeting, is it just the vote for the rezoning, or there's multiple votes?
The only vote, to my knowledge, the only vote we would be looking for would be for rezoning. The only other option would be is if in my conversations with the developer at that point and the engineer, and there is no way we're going to get $25,000 from someone, then I guess in theory we would have to potentially do that at that time. But I'm really hoping that if we get enough support for this, that we can then go to the developer and say, look, you're looking to spend a considerable amount of money. You're obviously going to profit from that. Don't let $25,000 stand in your way. I don't have any leverage at this point to try to have that conversation because he doesn't know exactly what we're going to do. But as we go down, I'm hoping that I can develop some leverage and be able to get the money from the developer.
And the development of 106 into 2 lanes, all that funding is coming from?
That would come from the state.
All from the state?
Yeah, so the state would they would pay for the restructuring of Lincoln Street, the light, the restructuring of Crescent Street, and the double lanes in both directions, as you see, down to West Street and Route 24.
My big question to David when I first heard about this was sidewalks, and it sounded like sidewalks had already been taken into consideration.
Yep, so again, it's all going to depend on what we have for space because we don't want to go through that. We can't go through a lot of land takings because you either end up in court, it drags out the process. Mm-hmm. However, that has been discussed with the engineer, is that we would be looking to do sidewalks on Lincoln Street, and we'd be looking to do sidewalks on Route 106. Again, we'll see as to how much money is approved. but that's going to certainly be part of it, especially since down here on the right, Lincoln
Right.
Street hopefully is going to have a sports complex in the future.
Exactly, that was my concern, was having a sidewalk for the kids to go from one of the schools to be able to walk through town and get to Lincoln Street. But this solves that problem. So that's fantastic. And it widens Route 106.
So again, it's just an FYI to the board. We've been spending a lot of time on this over the last handful of months. I think it's going to be a good project, but the town's going to have to approve it. And the state's going to have to approve the Mass Works. But if we can get them to widen Route 106 on the state's dime, I think that that's a really good win-win for the town.
Definitely.
And that's my report for the evening.
Right. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session, not to return to open session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, specifically the national opioid lawsuit the town is a party to, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, specifically the library union. Since, in my opinion, as the chair, strategizing in open session would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town, roll call vote.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what am I voting on?
To go into executive
Oh,
session.
to go into it?
Yeah.
Anderson, yes.
Raise yes. So at this point, we'll adjourn the regular session and go into executive session, not to return.